Hello, welcome back. I thought today we would paint a few poppies. If you live in California like I do, we've got poppies all over the place in the summer and late spring into the fall. I'm going to paint some orangish, reddish poppies here, but I'm going to start by putting in some yellow that I'm going to have as the center of my poppies. These aren't going to be the ones you might think with a big black dark center in them. I guess it's not really black, it's just dark. But we're going to put a nice bright yellow center in ours. So I'm just wetting my flowers to start. I'm going to drop in some gamboge, which is a nice warm yellow color. And then I'm going to mix on the side a nice orange color. And this is just cad red along with our gamboge that I already had on the palette. It's going to give us a nice red. I'm going to put that right around the edges of these flowers. I'm not even going to try to be too careful, but I want that color to start to blend in. Orange on the outside, yellow on the inside, and that's going to help to define our flower, the base of the petal all the way out to the tip of the petal. And we're just going to lay in a little bit of color here. Not going to worry too much about how it flows or where it flows right now. We're just going to get some of that color down on the paper. And there we go. That's the basis of our flowers right there. We've already got that done. I'm just going to mix up a little bit of green here. This is just Windsor green, I believe, with a little bit of yellow ochre in it. And there we go. There's our stems, a couple of buds that haven't come out. They hang down or point down towards the ground there. There we go. And each time I go back to my palette, you can see I just changed that color ever so slightly. It's going to give it a better composition, a more lively look here as we get to the end of the flower. All right, now before my petal dries a little bit, I'm just going to add a little bit more color to those, make them pop a little bit more on the ends. There we go. It's dried just a little bit, and I don't want it running quite all the way down. I'm going to just tap that in there. If I need to re-wet that flower a little bit, I'll just tap it wet ever so slightly, but for the most part, they're still a little bit damp. So I can just drop this color on just a little bit right around the edges. And again, we want to get that nice flow from the edges, from the tips of these petals, all the way back to the inside. So we're just going to drop that color on. We could have dropped it on a little bit more full, a little bit more color earlier on. But this will just serve to enhance that a little bit. And there we go. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to try to give a little bit of just a tiny little shadow line on these buds and stems here a little bit. They're still wet, so that water's going to run a lot to fill in a lot of that area. And I'm not going to worry about it right now. I'm just putting it on there. It's going to give us just a little more depth of our color. At the moment, it's a little wet, so I'm going to dry it off. Okay, now I'm back from drying it off, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to continue this process of working on the leaves here, on the petals. So I'm going to take some mix of lemon yellow and my gamboge, and I'm going to put it in here. This particular variety of poppy has these beautiful little yellow, I'm not even sure what you call them, stamen, I guess. I'm not sure, in the center of them. So I want to make sure I get a few of those in here. And I know it is yellow on yellow, but we'll just still be able to see that a little bit when it dries. And that's all we want to do, is mark the indication of that. So there they are. And now what I want to do is really mark where my petals are at. So this petal, I know, or what I can see of this petal is the back side of it. I'm looking at my picture to determine that. So I'm going to drop in a really rich dark red there, a dark orange, I guess, I'm sorry. And everywhere I think that there's a petal that is in shadow, or part of a petal that is in shadow, I'm going to drop that color in there. And where I need to go back and blend that in just ever so slightly, I'm going to go ahead and do that. There we go. I want a hard edge on one side and a nice soft edge on the other side. There we go. Just drop that in there. Now I could do this and continue putting hard edge, soft edge in and fill these all up, but I really want to be aware that I need to have a light by a dark, so I can't go completely around the edges of these just doing this. I've really got to pay attention to what I think are the petals on here and make just the part that's in shadow in the shadow. The rest of it, I need to have it in the light. That play on light and dark is really going to give a lot of depth and texture to these leaves. I guess not so much texture, but it is going to give quite a bit of depth to them. And so I just want to make sure that I've got that. There we go. And while I'm doing this, I've got to remember that those little things in the middle of the flowers are still wet, so that if I run this deep dark orange color into those, they're going to run and I'm going to have trouble. So I'm just staying away from them just ever so slightly. There we go. Just repeating this pattern of putting a hard edge on what I think is most in shadow and blending that into a lighter area. Of course, what's lighter and less in shadow. And if I do this around enough, we'll see which petals are in front on each flower and which ones are behind the others, and we'll also be able to see what part of the petal is in shadow or just not quite as bright a light. So there we go, and you can already begin to see that some of those petals are closer in front of others, I guess is the best way to say that. I'm just putting in a few shadow lines on these stems here. There we go. I've got my same mix I had before of greens. I've just darkened it ever so slightly. It's still a yellow ochre and Windsor green. There we go. Just pulling those up. I don't want to add too much detail to these. A little bit of detail is plenty. Not too much. I don't want too much of the viewer's attention to go to those, but I don't want to leave them blank so that the viewer doesn't get any sense from them. I don't want them to just be a green line, so I'm give them a little bit, but not too much. And back to the petals on this poppy. Give me a second. I really need to get this back into frame or zoom out just a second. I'll be there. 1 second. You can just see me working in the bottom there and grabbing a little extra paint just up on the lip of this and blend it out. And you can see in each of these petals, whichever's in front or whichever's behind, now we have a beautiful gradient from the center of the flower all the way out. The petals that are back behind are definitely darker. You can see that they're behind the petals in front of them. And there we go. It's looking really good. You can see I go to my cloth quite a bit. I want to just dab some color on, and I want to take most of the moisture off my brush. I want to make sure it's very dry, not totally dry, but pretty dry. I just want that color to run a little bit. If I put a very wet brush on there, it's going to run way out. Okay, I've dried this now. It's totally dry. That's what the flower is going to look like, and I'm going to put a little background on there. All right, I've got a little viridian and a little phthalo blue, and I'm going to mix the two of those colors. That's going to make the base of my background. And there we go. Because we're working with orange, which is the opposite of blue, I want to have a blue base back there, and there's a lot of red in orange. The opposite of red on the color wheel is, of course, green. And so I want to get in both of those colors in this background and really make those flowers pop off the page. I'm going to do something a little different than I do in others. I'm not going to paint the entire background. I'm just going to paint the part right around these flowers, the part where I want the viewer's attention to remain. That's all I'm going to paint here. And there we go. So I'm just going to dab in a little bit of color. That color is going to surround our poppies themselves, not so much on the stems, other than where it has to. And that's going to keep the viewer's attention right where we want it. Okay, I'm going to do a little splatter on this just to give it a little additional interest. It's also going to make the blue color that I've just painted on there a little bit more mottled, give it a little bit of texture. I'm trying to keep the splatter off the flowers themselves. I did get a little bit on there. I'm not going to worry too much about that though. It is quite a messy process when you do that. I like to clean it up before I do anything else. I don't want any of those spots coming back to get me. And there it is. Okay, I've dried this painting now. This is the way it's going to be. I think it turned out quite good. I hope you like this. If you have an idea for another flower that you would like to see, please drop a note in the comments and let me know what you want to see. I would love to paint something for you so that you could see it. Subscribe to my channel. I would love to paint with you again in the studio. I am going to sign this. There we go, and call that finished. Thank you so much. I enjoyed painting with you tonight.